Today I'm going to be working on this PlayStation 5. Yes, I know, it's another PlayStation 5 that doesn't turn on. But this has been sent in by a customer because he's taken it to another repair shop and the other repair shop said he thinks it's the Wi-Fi chip. I don't know what's made him come to that conclusion. I don't know what kind of test he's done. But with that being said, we are going to try and fix it today. So if you're new to the channel, my name is Dakota. I'm an electronics technician. I mainly work on games consoles, but I do work on other stuff as well. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications. And that way you don't miss any future videos. And if you do need to organise a repair, get in touch at dakota.repair and I'll do my best to help. If you need any parts and supplies for your own repair, I'll sell those on my online store at consolefix.shop. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. So I'll read this note in a second, but if we just take a look at this, you will see that, in fact, that did actually beep. So, yeah, it didn't do that a minute ago. But, yeah, it's beeping every 30 seconds or so, and that's a fairly common fault with the PlayStation 5. It's normally indicative of a short on the board, and they're normally fairly straightforward to figure out. You know, generally I can fix them. So hopefully this one is going to be the same. So yeah, let's find out, shall we? Well, if we take a look here at the note, it's actually quite funny. I'm going to admit, listen, I giggled at this, alright? I giggled like a little schoolgirl. Okay, so he says, "Hello Philip, thank you for having a look at my PS5. I turned it on and the PS logo came on, but nothing happened. I turned it off and now it does not start up. I took it to a guy. And it has been opened. He told me he thinks it's a Wi-Fi chip. I do have a disc in the drive, so if you can't fix it, if you can fix it, I'll be very happy. The PS5 is the one right from the start, so it's old, I know. I'll be adding a return label with UPS as well. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna listen. Okay, I'm an immature little punk. All right. I was gonna say a naughty banned word then, but I'm an immature little punk. All right, and I giggled like a schoolgirl when I read that note just because of the typo. All right, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. But anyway, if we try and turn this on again now, it would attempt to turn on, but no lights show up or anything like that. But yeah, okay, so apparently the other repair shop or this guy that it's been taken to thinks it's a Wi-Fi chip. Like I said, I don't know what made him come to that conclusion. If it is a Wi-Fi chip, it's generally going to be fixable, but I'm going to be honest and say that most of the time, if it is something to do with Wi-Fi, it's going to be a bad cap on the Wi-Fi, not the chip itself. The chip does fail, and it does fail quite often, but not as often as the capacitors on the bottom of it. So anyway, I'm going to get this apart, and I'm going to see what I can do about figuring out what's wrong with it. I might connect up to UART and just see what kind of readings we get, just to see if we get any error codes or anything. I may as well not fast forward through this bit because it doesn't take long to get into it to the point where I can connect up to UART. And just for context, it is 1:24 AM, so if I fumble my words, if I make any mistakes, anything like that, I'm tired. But we're going to see what we can do about getting it going anyway. So yeah, I know I do a lot of PS5 videos. The problem with my channel in particular is I can only do videos on, well, apart from what I buy, I can buy stuff. Obviously that gets expensive, and a lot of the videos, unless I'm spending like £5 or £10 on it, it's not really justifying it because I'm not going to be making enough back in, for example, ad revenue. So I can only really work on what people send in, right? And I'm happy to work on pretty much anything, you know, as long as the customer is willing to pay for it. Well, the problem with this type of a business model is I get repairs based on the videos I do. So people will search for the issue that they've got, they'll find my videos, they'll realise that they can't fix it because they don't have the tools or they don't have the skills to do it, you know, because, you know, some of these jobs can be complex. And then they'll just send it in to me, so I end up with the same faults over and over again. And that's part of the problem with doing these kind of repairs. It's not a problem because it obviously helps to pay bills and stuff, but it does, you know, create a scenario where it's like rinse and repeat sort of thing. So people say, oh yeah, I'm getting fed up with the PS5 videos and all of that, but at the end of the day, I just record what I'm working on. I don't know what's wrong with it before I get into it. Someone has messed with that. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with it before I get into it. And if I hit record, then I'm I'm working on the board. If I hit record, if I work on the board, I hit record. If I hit record, it goes on YouTube, alright? So, yeah. Alright, so I'm just going to connect up to UART here. This has already been done before. Please don't ask me why my ground wire is green. I don't know. Okay, so here's UART connected up then. So I've gone over this time and time again in videos and stuff. But essentially what we're doing here is we're connecting up a TTL device, a UART reader, to the system. So we've got a TX line, which is in the middle on the right hand side of the board on these test points here, and then we've got an RX line. So the TX line needs to go to the RX line on the UART reader, and vice versa. The RX line needs to go to the TX line and then ground to ground, so it's all sharing the same ground. So you have to reverse the wires. But I have gone over this. What am I doing? That's not going to work, is it? Told you it was late. That's not going to work. Trying to put 230 volts into the UART reader. It's a good job it doesn't fit. All right. Anyway, let's connect onto the. Let's go onto the desktop and we'll see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to load up my UART software here. This is my UART software. It's completely free to use. You can find it on GitHub. So if we go for get error codes from the PS5, I'm going to select COM13. And okay, yeah, so we get a 80C00136 Wi-Fi Bluetooth problem / power failure. Power short on the 5-volt line F7002. So we've got a couple of issues here. We've got a fuse issue, or we've got a 5-volt line issue, and we've also got a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth power failure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear these error codes. I'm going to press option 2, select COM13, make sure they're cleared. Yep, there we go. And I'm going to power cycle this, so press the power button. And then I am going to get the error codes again. And it's not coming up with any error codes now. Okay. There we go. Okay, so yeah, now it just says F7002 line. So what I think could have happened here is someone's replaced the Wi-Fi chip, and then unfortunately they haven't replaced the fuse on F7002. So for those of you that don't know, F7002, that's a 5-volt rail. So F7002 is the marking on the board, right? And that's the component identifier on, for example, the schematic and stuff. It's marked on the board, it says F7002, and it's a 5-volt in, and it's either 3.3 or 1.8 volts out, depending on what board revision you've got. On this board revision in particular, this is actually a EDM 020 board, so this is going to be a 5 volt to 1.8 volt. And the 1.8 volt powers the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip. So when we get a short, for example, on the Wi-Fi chip itself, it draws too much current, and that in turn blows the fuse, because that's what the fuse is there for. It's there to protect the circuits and to make sure that nothing catches fire, right? So what a lot of people do, one of the mistakes that people make is that they'll replace the Wi-Fi chip. They'll see an error on there saying saying Wi-Fi error on UART, and they'll just replace the Wi-Fi chip and they won't look at anything else. They'll just think, oh, it's a Wi-Fi issue. It must have damaged something else. Or, some people say, oh, it must have killed the APU or something silly like that. When in actual fact, it's just a simple fuse. So, yes, we could still have a Wi-Fi issue here. We could still have a bad Wi-Fi chip. I don't know what kind of work has been done to this. I don't know whether they've just reflowed it, or whether they've replaced the capacitor, or whether they've replaced the Wi-Fi chip altogether. I don't know the history of this. All I know is that it did say a Wi-Fi issue. I've cleared the error codes, I've got up-to-date error codes, and now it's telling me that it's just an F7002 issue. It's always best to clear those error codes and try again, because you could get a false positive and it's going to lead you down a path where you're looking for a fault that no longer exists because it's been resolved. So it is always important to clear those codes and obviously try getting the error codes again. Always take a mental note, obviously, of what's going on, but it's best to clear the codes and try and get the error codes again, just to make sure that you're not getting out-of-date error codes. Yeah, anyway, I'm rambling. I'm going to get this apart and I'm going to investigate and figure out what's going on. One thing I'll mention as well is, I know people do this because it helps them to remember and stuff like that, But one thing that makes me giggle a little bit on the PlayStation 5 is people will mark where there's no screw, or they'll mark where there is a screw. There's a trick to it, and I'll show you. If you take a look at the console itself, you see where these screws are? So see all these screws? Now look at where there's no screw. There's a line going through the centre of it. No screw, line through the centre. No screw, line through the centre. And same with that one there, line through the centre, line through the centre, etc, etc. You get the drift, right? Wherever there's no screw on the PlayStation 5, there's going to be a line through the centre. So that's a way to remember it pretty easily. You don't need to sit there, you know, circling the chassis. It's not going to hurt it, but it's just, you know, it'll save you time. Just look for the lines, and then you'll know there's no screw meant to be there. So just a little handy tip there. Well, I get why people do it, but there's just easier methods, right? Okay, there we are. So I'm inside the console here. I'll desolder that UART reader in a minute. I'm going to take the heatsink clamp off, and I can take the board out. On the plus side, this has all been cleaned out by the look of it, so I haven't got to do that. So if we look on the board, we've got some USB ports just here. So the back of the board, where you can access it from the top of the housing, we've got the USB ports here. And then if we look just down here and to the left, we've got this marking here, which is F7002. This is a 5 volt to 1.8 volt line. If we had the TLV62090 chip on here, which is a square chip, then it would be a 3.3 volt circuit. But because this is the EDM020 board, which is just there, it's a 1.8 volt. So we get 5 volts in on this side, and we get 1.8 volts out on this side. So what we want to do is, the first thing we're going to want to do is check in continuity mode and just check and see if this fuse is any good. So basically what that means is that if we've got a short, then it's going to beep and it's going to tell us. And a fuse is meant to be short. It's a wire, so it's meant to be short, and that is not blown. So we don't have a blown F7002 fuse. So where is my fault then? It appears to be on the 1.8 volt side. Okay, so we don't have a blown fuse. That is absolutely fine, and there's actually no short on the 5 volt line. The short is on the 1.8 volt side just here. So this part here, so we get 5 volts in, it does its magic, and then out pops 1.8 volt babies. So basically we've got a short on the 1.8 volt rail. So we need to figure out why. If we look on the other side of the board, we can clearly see here that someone's done some work here. But if we look on the other side of the board, we've got a bunch of caps. And that is, okay, no, it's not short. Alright, ignore me. That was just residual current. That one is though. Yeah, that one's short. Alright. This top one will be short as well. And that one, and that one. Yeah, okay, this, chances are, I mean, it can still be a cap, but chances are it's a chip. So what we can do then, because the problem is we can't really sit here looking for shorts, right? You know, we can't sit here removing components all day looking for shorts. So the easiest thing to do here is going to be just to solder a wire directly to the 1.8 volt line, and we're basically just going to find the short with voltage injection. So voltage injection, what it's going to do is it's going to force current through the system, and it's going to heat up a shorted component. Electricity is always going to want to take the path with the least resistance, and the path with the least resistance, if we're injecting into the 1.8 volt line, is going to be whatever the shorted component is, because that's going to have the least resistance. Not necessarily the least resistance to ground, just the path with the lowest resistance. You've got to think of electricity as being lazy, and whatever path it can find the shortest distance, you know, the shortest distance to the endpoint, it's going to flow through it. And if that path with the lowest resistance is, for example, a component which is short to ground, then it's going to take that path. And it doesn't help that my soldering iron here is a little bit oxidized. So I'm just going to use some wire wool to clean that. Nope, that didn't fix it. Okay, I'll change iron tips. So I'll just tin that area there. And then here I've got a wire which I'm going to solder to this 1.8 volt line. So first of all, I'm just going to get this thing tinned up. There we are. And then this area is a little bit small for this, but there we are. Damn it, nope. Oh, well, I'll put that cap back on in a minute. Or rather, I'll put a cap back on there before I finish. That just came completely off the board. That didn't work at all. Well, never mind. Why won't you tin, you bastard? Thank you. Right. Let's try again. Okay, that's better. Damn it. Can't believe that happened. Well, never mind. So that wire there is connected up to that bench power supply. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thermal camera and I'm going to just connect this up to the PC. So this thermal camera, it's very, very small, but it's the Infrared P2 Pro, and it is a absolutely fantastic bit of kit. So I will say now that this this product isn't sponsored. That being said, I did receive this for free, but it was well over a year ago, and I've used it every day since. And I'm not being paid to say anything, but it's an absolutely fantastic bit of kit. I'll leave a link in the top pinned comment, and it does help me out because it'll be an affiliate link, so I'll get a little bit of a kickback. I think it's about £18 actually. It's about £250 to buy the thermal camera, just for the record, about 250, 280 US dollars, but it's a fantastic bit of kit. So yeah, and I'll get about 18 quid if you buy it from my link, so it helps me out. Alright, I'm going to load up the thermal camera app, which is not the official endorsed app. I'll use TC View, which is the software for the Top Don, I think, but it works on the same driver, so winner winner. And let me just enable this. Okay, here we go. So you can see on the screen I've got the board here. So this is a live view. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect up my ground point. And I'm drawing 1.3 amps of current, which is just there. You can't see it very well, but just there. What I'm looking for is any sign of a heat spot. So we've got 1.3 amps of current here. I'm looking for heat. See if I can find anything which is causing this short. So you're going to get some reflections and stuff where the ground planes are, but yeah, okay. So nothing's showing up there. So I'm going to increase my voltage. I'm at 1 volt at the minute. I'm just going to... I can go up to 1.8 volts because it's a 1.8 volt line, so I can safely go to 1.8 volts, or I should be able to. What the hell was that noise? And now we're starting to see some heat around the Wi-Fi chip. Okay. So the question now, is this a short on the actual Wi-Fi chip itself? And I believe it is, because that heat is very, very spread out. So you can see how the heat is washed out on the bottom. If that was an individual cap, it would be very, very visible, right? It's very washed out, and you can see that the heat is coming from underneath here. So yeah, chances are the short is on the Wi-Fi chip itself. and that Wi-Fi chip needs replacing. So if you take a look again at the thermal cam, you'll see it corresponds to just there, and that's where the heat is coming from. So yeah, okay, I'll just desolder this from the board. There we are. I'm going to get rid of this Wi-Fi, this UART connector as well. There we go. Let's get rid of that. And we're good to go. So, if we go back to the ugly cam here, the best way to remove this that I've found, because we've got a couple of plastic connectors on the board itself, just there. So we've got the disk drive connector, the fan connector, the disk drive power connector, and the disk drive data connector. All in that area, right? But on the other side, we've got nothing. Nothing but a bunch of caps. So, the way that I do it, the way that I found works for me, is to just take the hot air without a nozzle on and just heat up from underneath the board. So just like this, I'm going to heat up from underneath, and I'm at 440 degrees Celsius at 40% airflow. I've got a bit of straight wire wool on there. My son's attacked my workshop today. He managed to get in while I wasn't here. And we've got some flux around this Wi-Fi chip, so someone's definitely been working on this. But like I said, what they've done, I don't know. So this chip will have to get replaced. I'll just heat it up until it comes off the board and then just lift it off. And there we go. So I'm going to grab myself a donor board with a Wi-Fi chip on. I'm going to move that to one side for a minute. And I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to remove it from underneath the board. Okay, so sometimes you can't get your tweezers underneath, so just slide it to the edge carefully. And then just lift it off. Place it down gently. And there's an entire ecosystem of components underneath the metal shield on the Wi-Fi chip, so just be very, very careful that you don't throw it around or anything, because you'll end up knocking a bunch of components. And trust me when I say there's a bunch of components under there. You don't want to be knocking those components all over the place. Okay, and once that's done, I can go ahead and get this chip reballed. So unfortunately there's no stencil available for this, so I'm going to have to do it manually. But if you do need a Wi-Fi chip pre-balled, I do sell them on my online store, consolefix.shop. Shameless shill, of course. And I sell them pre-balled and ready to go. Guaranteed working, guaranteed genuine, all of that good stuff. So I'm just going to tin all of this with leaded solder. And then I'm going to wick it away using solder braid. So I'm going to wick all of this away. So the leaded solder, that's just going to lower the melting temperature and make it easier to wick away. It's also going to make it safer and make it so we don't risk putting any pads, or don't add any unnecessary risk of putting pads, should I say. So I'm just going to go over this with the braid. Make sure that every pad is nice and shiny and flat and ready to take new solder balls. There we are. So once that's done, I'll just clean it up using a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. So the isopropyl alcohol is just on my microfiber cloth, and I'll just give it a wipe. Make sure it's nice and clean, and then I'm going to add a small amount of flux, so just a tiny layer, just enough so as the solder balls don't fly all over the place. There we are. Less is better on this occasion. I'm going to drop some 0.6mm solder balls on there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 solder balls to each pad. So I'm going to manually place them, but I'm going to add 2 solder balls to each pad, and then I'll give me a 1.2mm solder ball on each pad. This isn't necessary, but I just think it creates a better connection. It makes for a better job. And we've actually got a pad there which is, well, it's got a little bit of excess solder on it. So I'm going to have to sort that out. There we are. So it's just a little bit that I missed there. But basically that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to be adding two balls to each pad. It's going to take me about 5 or 10 minutes to do this, so I'll fast forward through it and I'll pick it up once I'm ready for the next stage. Alright, so we're just about finishing up here, so I'm just putting these last few solder balls in place, and then we're ready to get on with the next stage. So what we need to do in a second is we need to flow these down and just make sure that they're all soldered onto the pads. So you might think that they're going to blow away, but if you do it right, it should be fine. But as you can see, we've got 2 solder balls on each of those pads there. And if we just take the hot air, I've got no nozzle on because that's going to restrict the airflow and it's going to cause more airflow to flow down such a short space, sort of thing. You know, it's going to compress the airflow and it's going to cause it to blow too hard. I've actually got my hot air right now set at 40% airflow, right? I don't recommend using 40% airflow. I'm using it because I'm used to it. But if you're not used to it, you might end up causing issues. You might end up causing solder balls to fly everywhere. And hey, even I might, right? We've actually got one here that's only got 1 solder ball on. I'll just sort that out. There's another one there with only 1 on. I'll sort that out. And I think that's it. But you'll see now that the solder balls are all merging together. But right now, obviously, they don't look great, right? You know, you can clearly see that these are not rounded solder balls. But if you add some flux to the entire chip, because remember, we only put a thin layer on, just enough to hold the solder balls in place, right? So if we add some flux now to the entire chip, and then flow those down again, this time we can come a bit closer because they've already soldered down to the chip. But now that should all flow down and merge into proper solder balls. A couple of them you might have to give a little bit of a gentle persuasion, just tap them a little bit. But for the most part, they'll all merge into full solder balls, and they're all going to be nice and even, and they're going to be nice fluffy solder balls, right? Just like that. So now I'm going to move that out of the way and I'm going to bring the board back into play here. And this flux that's on here right now, that's not my flux, that's someone else's flux. It's definitely been at least reflowed, but I could tell that anyway because if we look at the old chip, it's a bit burnt. And I removed it from underneath the board, so I didn't cause that to burn. But I'm just going to tin all of these pads like I did on the chip. This flux isn't great. Whenever flux has been used, it's not good. A decent flux, like the one you get from consolefix.shop, wouldn't allow those pads to merge, look. I'm actually going to clean up these pads as well for this UART connection. So these 10 pads down here are all for UART, but we can clean those up at the same time. Okay, so I'm just going to wick this away. And again, same as like on the chip, we're just going to make sure that all of these pads are nice and flat. We've actually got a very slightly damaged pad where the antenna is, clean up these pads here as well. This isn't necessary, cleaning these pads up, but I'm in the area. There's already flux in the area. I might as well do it. I'm just going to make sure it's all nice and flat. There we go. And now I'm going to clean up again. And there we go. Alright, cool. Right, while I'm in the area, I'm just going to clean this area up as well. Just get rid of that old flux. I do need to replace that missing cap. So the reason this fuse hasn't blown is because it's on the other side of the circuit, so it's going through the chip, right? And there's going to be reverse polarity diodes that are going through here to stop the 1.8 volt line backfeeding into the 5 volt. So this chip here, excuse me, I've got the hiccups. This chip here is going to have diodes in it to prevent it from backfeeding, and that's why it hasn't blown the chip. Sorry, the fuse. But what I want to do before I go any further, I just want to check and confirm and make sure that the short is actually gone on the 1.8 volt line. So if you remember, we had some shorts on these top caps. So I've got one probe on ground. No. We still have a short. Yeah, we still actually have a short on that area, which means that it isn't just the Wi-Fi chip which is causing an issue. We do still have another short. There's no short on that line now, but we've got no chip on there. And if we take a look at another EDM020 board, so just here, this will be a bit out of focus, but it's fine. In fact, I can get it in focus. There we go. So if we take a look at another EDM020 board, you'll see that we're not meant to get a short on that cap. Same as that one there, not meant to have a short on it, but we do. So we need to find out where this short is now. It's probably going to be a bad capacitor, and we need to figure that out. So I'm going to just reconnect up my bench supply. This time I'm not going to solder a wire to it. I'm just going to use the probes themselves. So I'll start off just by cleaning this area up to make it a little bit easier to see. And this is the reason why I've checked this first, because if I'd have put this back on and tried to power it back on, it wouldn't have worked. And then I'm sitting there trying to fault find it with the Wi-Fi chip on, and it's probably going to do exactly the same. So, you know, it's probably going to show me a fault on the Wi-Fi again. So if I just inject voltage, that cap there we are. As soon as I inject voltage, that cap there lights up. So if I load up the thermal cam again, so I've got my thermal cam here, this cap here is going to light up. So if I just inject voltage, yeah. So can you see how that's very, very prominent now instead of being spread out? So the issue with this is the Wi-Fi chip itself has failed and that cap has failed. That's actually really rare. Really, really rare for that to happen. But it has happened, and this is actually hitting 142 degrees Celsius. Wow. You do not want to touch that. It's hitting 142 degrees Celsius according to the thermal camera. That's almost at desoldering temperatures. So all I'm going to do, this cap right here, ping, get rid of that, and now that short should be gone. So if I inject voltage again, we now get 0 amps of current. And if we take a look at the thermal cam, no heat spots. No heat spots. So I'm injecting voltage. Now we get no heat. Alright, so a couple of things to do here. first of all, we need to just replace this capacitor. Not important, but good practice to do so. So I'm just going to tin this area here, like so. There we are. And then I'm going to grab my donor board, and I'm going to grab a capacitor from there, because, well, I'm lazy and it's easier. So if I just get this in focus here, like I said, I'm going to take this capacitor from here. It's going to be the exact same cap. Although this cap, and all of the rest of the caps that are on here are the same or very close values anyway, so it wouldn't really matter too much. They're just bypass caps. They're not important, but it is good practice to replace them. Okay, so there's that capacitor. Solder that. Okay, so there's that done. The next job is going to be to replace this cap that I knocked off. And again, I'm just going to take it from this donor board. So it's going to be this cap up here. Okay, so I haven't actually tinned this area yet. There we go. Okay, so that's that. Let's clean this area up as well. I'm not worried about that bit of solder and stuff there from when I was injecting voltage. It's collateral damage. I'm really not concerned over that. But there we go, that is that. And now the final task is going to be to solder this Wi-Fi chip back on. And the way I'm going to do that is exactly the same way as when I removed it. So I'm going to just drop this chip in place. So I'm going to make sure I get the right orientation. And I've got some flux on the chip, so for now, I don't need to add any. The flux that's on the chip will transfer to the board, and that will help to solder it down. So I'm not worried about that right now. But I'm going to heat up from underneath the board, like I did when I removed it from the donor board. So if you take a look here, I'm just heating up from underneath. And that's going to flow the solder and solder it to the board. So in a minute or so you'll see this start to move and it'll start to sit down. At that point I'll add some more flux. Just going to add some flux here. That should flow down underneath the chip. And there we go. That should be job done there. So I'm going to leave that for a couple of minutes to cool down. I don't want to be putting any isopropyl alcohol or anything on this yet, just given how much heat we've had to put into it to solder that chip down. But if we just take a look at the other side, you'll see that we haven't done any more damage to it. There was definitely some signs of heat in that area where someone else has put heat into it, but it's no worse now than when it came to me. In fact, it's in better condition, which is what I always aim for. Why does that look like a penis? It's just me, or am I being immature? I don't know. Looks like a penis. Anyway, enough of that. So we're not going to get all the way underneath the chip. The way to clean that would be the ultrasonic cleaner, but this is no clean flux, it's fine as long as we get the majority of it off. It's not going to cause an issue. We just want to clean up around it. So I just give it a wipe down. So I'll use a brush to start with and then use the microfiber cloth just to get rid of any smear marks or anything like that. You know, like I said, we're never going to get it perfect, but we'll get it as close to it. There we go. That's a job done, I think. I certainly hope so. Alright, so one thing we can do before we actually go ahead and power this up, if I just set my bench power supply to 12 volts, I can check the boot sequence on the power supply. And what we should be seeing here is when I apply power to this, so when I give it 12 volts onto the 12 volt connector just here, I should see this power supply jump up to around about 300 milliamps, and then it should drop back down almost instantly. Okay, so one probe on ground. Yep, that's a successful boot sequence. It should be turning on. So I am just going to loosely reassemble this for now. I'm not going to screw everything back down. I just want to put it back together enough to be able to give it a test. So basically that's going to be just screw in the heatsink, obviously put the board in, connect up the flex cables, and that's it pretty much. I don't need to screw it all back down to confirm whether it's turning on. I don't need to do the liquid metal to confirm whether it's turning on. You know, the liquid metal is going to be fine for testing. Obviously, when I put it all back together, I'll redo the liquid metal, I'll respread it and stuff, but other than that, it's fine. You know, it's okay for now, just to test it. And what I am going to do is I'm going to connect up the disk drive as well, because the customer said there's a game inside here, so I can get that out for him. Although, to be fair, it's probably better to leave it in there. It's probably going to be safer, but never mind. Okay, let's take a look, shall we? Does she turn on? She does. Awesome! That is a successful repair. There we go. It does have a disc inside there. Black Ops 6. There you go. Okay, so it takes and ejects a disc. Let's make sure the fan spins. So I'm going to go through my usual tests. I did just feel that fan try and kick in. So that is spinning. I don't have a PS5 controller to hand. Not immediately. That's fine. Okay, my PS4 controller's been a little punk. I'm going to wait for it to shut off and then it should fire up. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to turn off HDCP really quick. System. HDMI. Disable HDCP. And now I can connect it up to my capture card. There we go. So that's working. Let's make sure we get a Wi-Fi connection. We do. It's connected to the internet. Good. So let's just test the internet connection. It's going to run a speed test. Yep, that's working absolutely fine. Awesome. So yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. So I'm really not sure what the deal was. Does this chip work? I don't know. But I can't really risk that, can I? Unfortunately, because I don't know how much heat's been put into it and stuff. I can't warranty that. You can never warranty someone else's work, and realistically, on a lot of jobs, you need to just basically, you know, start again, sort of thing, because you don't know what someone's done to it, and that's the problem. I think it was Lee from Uber Micro Repairs. Recommend checking out his channel, by the way. I think it was Lee from Uber Micro Repairs who actually mentioned that the other day about, you know, you can't just warranty someone else's work because you're responsible for it, and ultimately you don't know what they've done to it, right? And he's absolutely right. You know, you don't know what someone's done to it. So the only way that I can fully warranty this is if I actually change the Wi-Fi chip. It was reporting a Wi-Fi fault. I was getting heat from that Wi-Fi chip, and then obviously it showed another fault afterwards with the capacitor and stuff as well. So yeah, that's all been changed. Obviously there wasn't an issue with the F7002 fuse. It was just that there was an issue with the F7002 circuit, because it's a 1.8 volt circuit which powers this Wi-Fi chip. So yeah, anyway, where's that? Oh, Corty, haha. Yeah, anyway, so that's going to be it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new in this video. If you did, let me know. Leave me a comment down below. If you need any parts and supplies for these, you can get them from my online store, including those Wi-Fi chips and stuff. I do sell all of the parts of the PlayStation 5s, including the RAM, the SSD controllers, safe bridge, all of that sort of stuff. I strip down the boards, I test the components, and then I sell the parts because I'm a money grabbing YouTuber. If you need to repair yourself, if you don't think this is in your skill level, or if you don't have the tools to do it, I'm more than happy to do it for you. Just for context, I'll be charging £100 for this. That's going to be £60 labour and £40 for the Wi-Fi chip. I think they're £40. I'll have to double check. I can't remember. But it'll be about £100 for this repair, which was what was quoted to the customer anyway. So, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Turns out around about 65% of people who watch the videos are not subscribed. So if you could just hit the subscribe button, and if you are subscribed, make sure that all of the notifications are turned on and enabled so as you get notified whenever I release a video. As always, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.